Hey man, are you having a hard time communicating with your clients? Do it sound like you speaking English and they speaking Japanese? Well, this video is to help ease the tension between the language barrier of audio engineers and the clients that they serve. What's up, audio engineers, artists, producers, anybody who wants to be in the recording studio or is. I'm Wayne from Wayne.wav. This video is going to help you to understand some of the common terms that are used in a recording session or used in a mixing session. Now, this video is going to serve as a great utility for any engineers to share with their clients so that y'all can better communicate with each other. And clients, artists, please watch this video so that you can make sure that the engineer understands your ideas and can get them out as you need to on the record. All right, so let's go ahead and jump right into one of my first terms. Now, one of my first terms that I actually want y'all to actually remove from your vocabulary altogether is run it back. When I'm recording, I'm in a session, and when I hear the terms run it back, I really can't decipher what that means. Do you want me to play it back? Or do you want me to record it again? Or do you want me to get up and start playing football? Okay, so the term run it back can be a little confusing in the studio. So while in certain settings, it may be easy to understand what's happening, but when you're in the booth as an artist, after you lay a take and you say run it back, your engineer most likely doesn't know whether you want them to re-record that section or just play it back. So instead of saying run it back, say either play it back or let's record that again. All right, so now let's get off into some more technical terms that's gonna help the mixing process go a lot smoother. So when you need to explain some of these things that you wanna hear in your mix, in the recordings, here are some of the terms that you might use to describe them. The first thing first is a simple one, and it's going to be reverb. Reverb is basically the atmosphere that you're in. It's whether you're in a hall or whether you're sounding like you're in a closet. So getting a reverbed effect can be done pretty easily, but you need to be able to communicate that. I know a lot of them say like, yo, you know, what's that? I feel like I'm in a church or I feel like I'm in a hall. Let's go ahead and take a listen to what reverb sounds like so that you can identify it and be able to communicate it. So typically, reverb is set up as a send and return, which you don't necessarily need to worry about or focus on right now. But this is what reverb sounds like. I'm just going to solo this track here and bypass these other effects, and you will hear what this track sounds like with reverb and without reverb. Add another comma. All right, that's no reverb. No reverb there. I'm turning the reverb up. I told her call me wish it. I'm about to add another. And then back to no reverb. Add another comma, baby, add another comma. Need a money counter, baby, got too much to count up. Now, there are all types of reverbs, from room reverbs, halls, plates, churches, but just knowing that term to add that space and dimension that you want to add will really help to get your thoughts through to your engineer. Now, typically going along with reverb is a term delay. Now, with delay, I want to break that down into two sections because the other side of delay, the delay gets misused sometimes for another term called latency. So first, let me show you what delay is. Delay is actually an effect that causes an echo. So ultimately, I'm going to turn this reverb back down, and let's open up my delay send here. We're going to first hear this without any delay, and then we're going to hear the delay as I turn up the delay. Add another comma. I told her call me wish it. Okay, so delay is interchangeable with the term echo, and you can use an echo if you want to, but basically a delay plugin, it gets its name because it's playing that audio back delayed in time, which ultimately causes the echo type effect that you hear. It pushes it back in time, delaying it, and thus giving us a delay effect. Let's hear that one more time. Add another comma. I told her call me wish it. I'm about to add another comma. Now, on the other side of delay is something called latency. Now, latency is a totally different concept than delay. Delay is an effect that you might want. Latency is something that you never want. So latency might occur when you're actually in the booth and you have the headphones on, you speak into the microphone, and then you're hearing yourself back late. Right? You're hearing yourself back delayed. So I understand why you might call latency delay, but the act of actually speaking into the microphone, that time that it takes for you to sing or rap into the microphone and then you hear yourself back in the headphones, that is actually called latency. Now, here's a little secret. There's always some type of latency with digital audio. But there are ways that we can reduce it so that it's not noticeable. If you're in the studio and you happen to notice latency, you can tell your engineer, hey, there's too much latency. A couple of causes for latency could be plugins, or you have a hardware buffer size that's set too high. Right? Now, just so you artists know, I'm going to show you how to actually check how much latency a track is incurring. So once I go to a track in Pro Tools, you might just need to check your engineer one day. You say, hey, it's too much latency. No, it ain't. Well, if you go over to the track that you're recording on in Pro Tools, if you hold the Command key or Control if you're on a PC and click on the volume here right in the edit window, you can see how much delay is being caused on that track by plugins. Now, yes, we are calling that delay because that track now is being delayed, and when we hear it back, it's going to ultimately be perceived as latency in our ears. Now let's go to the setup menu and go to the other fix. If you go to setup, choose playback engine, the hardware buffer size. Latency can also be caused by a high hardware buffer size. So, you know, your engineer would really hate it if you had to suggest that they lower the hardware buffer size to reduce the latency, but at least they'll know that you know what you're talking about. A good hardware buffer size to use during a recording session should be anywhere from 256 and lower. The lower hardware buffer size you go, the least amount of latency you'll have to worry about. All right, I hope y'all are learning a lot, and if you are, make sure that you share this video with your clients and hit a thumbs up and drop down in the comments too. Let's get down to my next topic here. The next one is going to be punching in and punching out. Now, a punch in or punch out is simply the act of replacing a section of audio that's already been recorded. Let me show you. So let's say I want to re-record one of these lines here. I would first need to go ahead and enable quick punch mode, but your engineer will know that. So if I liked most of my performance and I just want to replace a part of it, after we start recording, let me set my input. There we go. Cool. So now, basically, I'm able to punch in. So let me listen to what this line actually says. Add another comma. I'm about to come up. I told her, call me wishy. I'm gonna replace that line. I told her, hit me wishy, just to make it sound better. So here we go. I'm gonna start playing, keeping everything that I have. And then when I get to that certain point that I wanna replace, I will replace it by starting to record, ultimately punching in, and then I'll punch out. Add another comma. I'm about to come punch in. I told her, hit me wishy. And I can do it again. Okay, so if you see, I just punched in and punched out twice on this track, replacing the section and adding something new. So that's a punch in and punch out. It's very useful for when you have a part of the track that you want to keep, but you just have something that you need to make a little bit better. All right, so the next topic that I want to cover is going to be stabs versus ad-libs versus doubles. So as you are recording, you may have to talk to your engineer and say, hey, I want to double that. Or they might tell you to double that or actually add some stabs or add some ad-libs, right? Those terms often get interchanged and it makes it really difficult to communicate. And especially if you're recording yourself, you want to make sure that you're labeling these tracks appropriately if you're going to send them out to a mix engineer so that they can work a lot more efficiently and be sure to get your goals across the finish line. All right. So let's first attack the first thing. So a double is simply a doubled recording of the performance. It is not going to be taking one performance and copying it. A double should always be you recording the same thing twice to give a stacked or doubled feeling. All right, so stacks would be another term that we could use to replace doubles. So I'm gonna just go back to my session. And what I'm doing is I'm just gonna make a new track here. And then on this new track, I'm going to record, enable that track, and then I'm going to record the same thing of the previous track. Whoop, and I missed one, so I'm going to punch in. Right? And if we listen to this back, we get a cool stacked effect to where there's more than one voice performing. Add another comma. I'm about to come up. I told her call me with shit. Pull up. I'm about to add another comma. Now, a stab is when you double only certain words in a performance for a dramatic emphasis of that part. Typically, this will be done like during a verse or even a chorus, it can happen, but most likely it would be a verse. Now, let's go ahead and stab this verse up. I'm going to, again, come down and make a new track. And let's listen to this track first so I know what it is I need to stab. Run it up, I'll be waking up for a check. All right, cool. All right, let's check out and see how I would record stabs on this recording. I ain't missing no amount, yeah. Run it up, I'll be waking up for a check. Cut it up, I'ma bust it down with the set. Can you turn around? I'ma wipe it down if it's wet. I keep a gun around. I don't got no time for a threat. Nigga be tripping. All right, now you see I missed a couple parts, but you get the idea to where I'm emphasizing the endings of my bars. Let's take a listen. Run it up, I'll be waking up for a check. Cut it up, I'ma bust it down with the set. Can you turn around? I'ma wipe it down if it's wet. I keep a gun around. I don't got no time for a threat. Nigga be tripping. Okay, so stabs are used to emphasize certain parts of the performance while keeping others more intimate and singular. Now, ad-libs is anything else that you might be adding in. Literally, ad-libs is me yelling and screaming, yeah, yeah, all in the background, right? So that's my ad-lib track, which you can hear here, right? And you can see where I'm performing those and you can listen. Let's just solo these ad-libs so we can listen to what they sound like. Those my ad-libs, okay? They sound a little crazy by themselves. But all together, up for a check, cut it up, I'ma bust it down with the set. Can you turn around? I'ma wipe it down if it's wet. I keep a gun around. I don't got no time for a threat. Nigga be tripping on my jury. The ad-libs can be really fun. You just got to loosen up and add in some feeling, right? That you, whatever you feel it. And they are called ad-libs, not ab-libs or whatever it is, man. I've heard so many crazy terminologies used to describe ad-libs, but those are the differences between doubles, stabs, and ad-libs. Okay, so this next term that we're going to talk about is distortion. Distortion is typically going to be the engineer's job to make sure that he maintains and doesn't allow to happen during the recording. But if you hear distortion, and I want you to be clear on what it is because you may be recording yourself, you need to know if you are receiving or achieving distortion. And typically, distortion is not what we want in a recording. It happens if you are too loud. Maybe you have your preamp up too loud, or you have a microphone that's too close to the source, or whatever it is, and it's causing a distorted image inside of your DAW. Let me just go ahead and I'm gonna go back to my record track here. I'm gonna solo this. Now this might get a little bit loud, but I'm gonna just solo this track. I'm gonna crank my preamp all the way up a little bit. Yeah. All right, and then let's hear what distortion sounds like. Yo, okay. Do you hear that crunchiness? I know you hear that crunchiness. That is the sound of distortion, okay? This is not what we want. And let me show you what distortion looks like as well. When I record a distorted signal, it gets all squared off. You see, a non-distorted signal is very open. It has peaks, it has valleys. This distorted signal is being cut off. Let me turn this back down. All right, we back to a regular level. Now, when I zoom in on this, if your wave files look like this, to where the tips, the peaks of those wave files have been literally chopped off, right? That is ultimately distortion. It doesn't sound good. It's not going to lend for a good recording or a good mix. You basically have ruined the recording. If you hear that, or if you are recording yourself and you see this in your waveforms, please use that as a red flag. Watch your meters. If you're hitting red on the meter, then that means it's too loud. Now, can distortion be used as an effect? Absolutely. We can always add distortion in later and use it tastefully as needed. But if we are getting distortion that we don't want, that can really ruin the whole recording process. All right. So another two terms that I want to talk about that often get interchanged is mixing and mastering. Our mixing and mastering are two pieces of different puzzles, okay? Now, mixing is when I take literally all of the elements of a song, the kick, the snare, the bass, the everything, the vocals, right? And I'm basically fitting those all in together to make them work as a unit. Mastering is taking that final mixed product and then making it loud enough, making sure that it translates across multiple systems, different playback devices, making sure that it's going to translate on your digital streaming services, all of that. So mastering is like a final polishing job that's done. Think about a mechanic versus a body repair when you think about mixing and mastering. The mechanic can put the whole engine together, right? But he can't do the paint job and all the interior and everything like that, right? Some mechanics can. So some engineers actually offer mixing and mastering service, but it's not always a given. And you don't necessarily always want the same person who's mixing the song to also master the song. They might not have mastered that skill set of mastering just yet. So mixing is literally taking all of the individual elements of the song and making them work together in a way that is pleasing and creative to listen to. Mastering is making that final mix usable and kind of uniform across multiple different playback devices and platforms. Now, huge difference, even though most engineers nowadays will claim they do mixing and mastering, right? You think about that, there's a lot less that we need to do in mastering phases today, but mixing and mastering are two different things. You need to decide when you are approaching an engineer, what services do you want from them? Are you looking for recording services? Are you looking for mixing services? Or are you looking for mastering services? And knowing the differences between those three will help that conversation go a lot smoother. Now, before we get out of here, I got one more tip that I want to share with y'all. One more term that I see kind of getting jumbled up out there. But before I do that, if you're finding value in this video, please make sure you hit the subscribe button and share this with somebody else so that they can find value too. So the next term that I'm going to talk about is going to be two-track mixing versus multi-track mixing. Let me clean this up real quick. I don't want to confuse nobody. All right, so a two-track mix, right? And this is definitely applies to me as a mix engineer because I work with a lot of artists who actually record themselves in their home or project studios and they send the mix to me. Now there's a difference between having a full multi-track mix and just having a two-track mix. So a two-track mix basically refers to the beat being stereo audio. Okay, so when a two-track mix, all of the elements of the beat are within a stereo track, aka a two-track, because it has two channels of information, left and right. Okay, so that's why it's called a two-track mix. So I'm working off a two-track with vocals. So ultimately, I'm just really mixing the vocals. There is some things that I could do to enhance the quality of the two-track, but ultimately, you know, you're just mixing the vocals on top of that. Okay, now A full multi-track mix gives you so much more control. A full multi-track mix will actually have individual elements from the music as well as all of the individual vocals. Let me take a little second here to open up a multi-track mix so you can see the difference. So now here we have a multi-track mix session to look at. As you'll notice is that multi-track mix sessions typically will have a lot more tracks, because not only do you have all of the individual tracks for the vocal performance, but you also have the individual tracks for the music. So if you notice, I have a track for the 808, a track for the kick, multiple kicks, right? I have a track for the snare, the tambourine, the bells, the pianos, anything else, any other elements for this mix. I have full control over how every instrument sounds, as well as all of the vocals. So yes, you get a whole lot more control with a multi-track mix, because not only will the engineer be mixing the vocals, they'll also be mixing the beat, and they'll be mixing them as a unit so that everything works a whole lot more nicely together versus just trying to mix vocals on top of an already semi-mixed beat. I'm Wavy Wayne from Wayne.wav. If you'd like to learn more about recording and mixing better and faster, subscribe to this channel and visit my website, Wavy.wav. Be dope.